to the Kun, the Chua, the world's first people. Those are those big butt women. Those were mother goddesses. Those were the transmitters of God's force on earth to the world's first people. The Chua and the Kun were the first 149,000 years ago to 159,000 years ago, because mitochondrial DNA has a 10,000 year error rate. First people on the planet, the pure people, the most just. And Brother Mkhulu knows because they're from South Africa. Kalahari
Yes.
Desert. The language of the African people in South Africa have a click. That click comes from the first language spoken by human beings on the earth, and they're the only Twa that continue to speak it. So this book is inspired by that. It's inspired for me personally by my grandmother, who tears comes to my eyes when I think about her, the love and that she gave me. And her picture is a big picture of this picture I showed you, hangs over my bed. I hope we never have an earthquake, because if it falls on my head, I'm dead. But since I sleep to the side, I don't think, and grandmother wouldn't let her picture fall on me anyway. So, Brother Mkhulu, let's open this up. You're a spirit man, and you're doing a lot of work in South Africa. Why don't you share with us your spiritual journey, and also if there's any connection with this mother principle, tie that in as well.
Oh, thank you so much, Baba. Like I said, even the last time that, the Mother Principle book, this is one of the books that assisted me on my journey towards, the enlightenment, especially enlightenment, about our true Kemetic, philosophy and our true spirituality as African people. And, as we move along, we then discover, that we are on the place where it all started. We can now locate everything, about Abatwa, tracking them, especially what you said with the DNA from here. Then they moved, towards the north, where they refined everything. So Abatwa gave us, the foundation, of all the sciences that are, in the universe, because those are the people who gave us civilization in a way. Because from them, their enlightenment and their technology, their development is still affecting us, because it gave the world the foundation on which upon, even if it was plagiarized, but Western philosophy was built upon this great, knowledge system from Abatwa, the Twa people in, Central Africa. They call them the Hadzabe, the Hadzabe. And, even in the DRC, they are there. And, what is very fascinating is that they are refusing, this civilization that they are being enticed with, even when, even here in Botswana, when the government is trying to bring them, right into the, mainstream, they are still refusing. These are people who are comfortable living that ancient life, because that is the life that we aspire to. All these things that we call civilization, it was actually regression, because they were taking us out of the alignment that we always had. So they value that alignment. That is why they are still connected to nature. They refuse to move to the cities. They are nature-centered people. So this is what, we give thanks, even though they are on the periphery, when it comes to the development. The rest of the continent, it's like they've become the second-class citizen, which is just a shame. because these are people who should be honored. These are people that we should have statues of them all over, like what our ancestors did in Kemetic. There's a statue that they call the statue of Bess, who is, from that, first, family. So the whole of the continent, we should give, a praise and honor to these important ancestors, because without them, we wouldn't be where we are, and we wouldn't know what we know. And some of them, the way they preserve the knowledge, they carved it, on rocks, painted on the rocks in the caves there, so that, generations that are to come are able to access the knowledge that they had, and that language of them writing, on those rocks, the pictures. This is what, I call made nature.
It is.
It was a symbolic, language, so this is what, ended up being the classical language of the continent, which must be revived, so that I hear a lot of people talk about Swahili, but Swahili, comes second, because according to Sheikh Anta Diop, Medu nature connects all languages of the continent. This is where, they branched out from. So we need to revive that classical language, which is the oldest language. Actually, it's the only script that exists, in the world, because the British, the French, they don't have a script, according to our doctor, Theophile Obenga. So that's the only script, because all other, nations, they built their language on the basis of, Medu nature. And that is the language we're given by our, dear ancestors, the Twa people.
Yeah, very true, very profound statements. I hope people listen very closely to that. The Twa, in this case, the first Twa are Kung, and then others come from them. And the ones that Brother Mkhulu is referring to particularly, they come from Central Africa near the Congo. They're descendants of the Kung people, and they are the world's first people. They give the world civilization. Civilization means civil. White people have confused material structures with being humane. And so their cultures have often been cruel and have not been based on civilization. And the key, I think, to wisdom, to creativity is truth. They give birth to the term Ma'at. Before it was used, it was called Masuri. Masuri. I checked this with Obenga because he's a linguist and he approved of it. But they were the most upright people. They called themselves the Kung people, pure people. Their concept of God has no blemish. Other religious concepts of God have this idea of God being jealous, God being a dictator, God doing arbitrary things that are really wrong, but you'd better do it. Like put your son up, your favorite son up for sacrifice. And then God, that's Abraham. That God leaves him alone. So that's supposed to show God. No, God would never ask you to sacrifice a life. That's somebody who wrote about God. That was their culture, not God. So the Twa give birth to the most civil societies where there's no slavery. It's the only people in the history of the world that didn't enslave everybody and everybody was free. Then they gave us the formula for justice, which is the best formula for truth and justice on this earth. And that's what the mother principle is centered on. God gave me this vision. And I would say this is a more important breakthrough than Einstein's theory of relativity, which is very important, that time is relative after the creation of the planet. That's very important. But this one here, that's repeated over and over again in the mother principle, is even of more importance, because with this, every human being would have a roof over their head. Every human being would have food to eat. No one would be abused. No woman, no child, no elder, no body, no slavery. And people would live the good life, which for over 130,000 years, humanities did, because they lived under this formula that God revealed to me. And I call it lineal, but this is where the twin lineal term comes from. God told me the just societies of Africa were those where, and this is what comes from God. When I get this thing, it comes from the light. I talked to you about this before. There's no speech. It's telepathic. Without speaking, it came to me from the light as a vision. The Twa societies were based on, and this is coming from God, all the males and females being equally empowered to govern every phase of society. That's it. And that is the best formulation. And I don't want to just reduce this as this is Ma'at. No, no. This is the formula of the just people who behaved in that manner. They didn't just talk it, they walked it. And the reason these Twa do not want to go back or come into these modern societies is they know this is hell, this is misery. And these little people are not going to get food, they're not going to get clothing, they're not going to get shelter, and they're going to face war as they are in the Congo right now, where over 1 million people have been murdered through corporate wars orchestrated here in the United States and by some of the crooked leaders in Rwanda and Uganda and in other places. And so that formula was used to keep a just society of male, female, equal empowerment that I call twin lineal. We have defined African families as either matrilineal or patrilineal, patriarchy or matriarchy. Matrilineal, last name for the mother, patrilineal, last name from the father. And then inheritance would come through that. Your name would come through that in theory. Patriarchy, ruled by men. Matriarchy. Social structures or family structures are the foundation for the whole of society. So everything about a society springs from your family. And that's where it started off with Big Mama, because Big Mama is carrying the wisdom of that family, because culture is passed on through women. And so that was the wisdom that was the basis for just societies. No man could have more power than any woman. And that's it. And so if there's a balance there, and then there's a spiritual thing, because the Twa give birth to the idea of one God, but it is not a male, it is not a killer. It's not what John Henry Clark called the male killer cults. God was, they said, Ilani, the light that lights up everything. The Bambara say God is infinite force outside of space and outside of time. The light that was shared with me was God. God is a white light, a great white light, a part of which is in all of us. So as Brother Mkhulu said, they moved from South Africa, and then some later, from Central Africa and the Congo and other places. They moved into Kemet, and they are the Anu people who founded Kemet. Yes. These little people. Asar was Anu. They gave birth to Kemetic civilization. And if you look at the best proof for it, I have it on the cover of the integration trap. It's a picture of an Anu person. I had Obenga translate it for me, and it read, this great one has come to worship the god, the Pharaoh. And this little man that's standing there, he is a person who's a governor of a nome, like a state in the United States. And he has come to worship this greater one who was a god, Pharaoh. Pharaoh were these little tiny people. The Twa said that they had founded a civilization called Kemi, and that they built ships and sailed on the water. That would be the Nile. They built cities. They built great things, and then they walked away from it. In previous shows, I've said this. They said they weren't happy. Power didn't make them happy. They said what made you happy is when you bring an antelope home to your wife and she has a smile on her face. That's what love is, when you're putting smiles on somebody's face. You know what I mean? So the point is, they found world civilization. They innovate medicine, this concept of God, fire. They smelt iron. They are the masters of thought, because being the first people and pure people, they're tuned to the truth. So their minds operate on the highest order, being able to see into the future, being able to see in the past. And that's how they could build these great civilizations. So what Brother Mkhulu said is very, very important, that these people now are being treated like nothing by Africans, by whites. The Greeks called them pygmies, which meant that they were stunted people. They're fully grown, short people, you know, fully grown. Sure. And then they put them in prehistory, which means the people that can't, who don't write. But what they mean by that is outside of history. But they gave birth to the world's first global civilization based on justice, and gave birth to agriculture that gives birth to what we have today.
That's true.
So this is the foundation. So Brother Mkhulu, why don't you tell us something about your spiritual journey, and also what's going on in South Africa right now, and some of the work you're doing in South Africa?
Yes, what is going on is very exciting. The consciousness, it's at another level. And, we happen to be there to actually, fill the void, because the movement that we are pushing is the only movement, that has come up with a practical solution, where now we are not only learning and internalizing this knowledge, but we are living it. And, that then becomes an example for a whole lot of, other people to say, here is how our ancestors lived before. And these are the people who are trying to show us the way, back home. That home of the Toa people, people that understood the importance of harmony, harmonizing, and, even the recognition of each other's position. Like in the family, there was harmony because everybody understood their role. Our ancestors, they understood that the female, in the house, that is the most powerful spiritually. So therefore, most of the things that have to be done spiritually has to be led, because women, they are one with the moon. That magnetic energy. That is what they do. Even in the house, they bring warmth. They build a home. A man buys the house, but a woman builds the home. So there was no competition. Why? Because they understood that they have to replicate, all the action of the sun and the moon. You've never heard of a situation where there's a clash, where the moon now wants to rule the day, or the sun wants to rule the night. There's always harmony, recognition that the mother rules the night, because she's associated with, the blackness, the triple black, where everything emerged from. Then, the father represents, everything that is, material, because that light, which is why even the roads at home, you'll find that, the father is more, focused on delivering matters, physical things. That is where we are strong. our women are strong spiritually. So that duality brings, especially when there's an understanding, within the home, that we can never compete with each other. We always need to maintain that balance and recognizing each other's strength. Nobody should be subdued, nobody should be suppressed in terms of their natural abilities. That is how they found harmony. And that's why we didn't even have prisons those days, because people were self-policing. This thing that is inside us, that conscience. This is what drove people. People didn't need to be told, that what you are doing is wrong. They knew inside, because the voice always tells them. So that is why, even the development of this artificial intelligence, it's a mess, it's a regression, because we are destroying our innate abilities for telepathy. Why are we developing the phone? Because we should be communicating telepathically, because we are spiritual beings. We are always connected together, meaning that once you are in that frequency, you are able to send messages to somebody in Japan. They receive the message and communicate back. This is this is the civilization they gave us. But now, because of the Western influence, all those things are actually slowly dying. I remember at some point I used to memorize over 50 numbers in my head. But now I'm no longer able to do that, because the cell phone does everything for me. So I'm so dependent on artificial, intelligence, to a point that once the cell phone is lost and I haven't saved on the cloud, it's a mess. I have to start afresh. So sometimes we might think that we're developing, and yet we are regressing. The very same abilities, these spiritual abilities and innate abilities that we have, are slowly dying, and we are turning ourselves into robots. And another thing, Baba, which is very important, remember, we're in the age of Ma'at, where we need to balance. There's no longer men dominating or women, men dominating. We have to find harmony. Ma'at is calling us to actually, establish that balance and order in our lives first as African people, because the whole world are waiting for us to reach that point of harmony amongst ourselves as African people, because we have a bigger role of leading this world into, a better world, better than what we're experiencing today. So naturally, we are in that season of Ma'at. Ma'at, even if we don't like it, but Ma'at is going to force us into reaching that point of balance and harmony again. Towards.
Yeah, and I think in my journey, I had to overcome obstacles to having that balance, because going through some life crisis, I came to realize that I was very good with the masculine, but not so good with the feminine. And I had waged wars and won all my battles. I scared my enemies to death, and sometimes even scared people who were around me that loved me. You know what I mean? Because it was that fierce masculine energy. You know what I mean? So I went through a life crisis, and then I went on retreats for, I've discussed this in my show before, of 3 months, a year for 5 years, 15 months, where I went away in nature and looked at myself and did self-cultivation, which was cultivating my mirror. And I knew that I had this weaknesses, things that happened in my family life that showed me that I did, things that I should have seen that I didn't see. And so I was there working on myself. What enabled me to go through this and then to have this vision that led to the male-female equal empowerment vision was that I was able to draw from African philosophy. I was able to draw also from African American philosophy, because you have to apply what's in the past to your present. And so I had this rigid thinking. It was good or bad. You know what I mean? I was, as a revolutionary, I developed into a thinker, and I was thinking African thoughts, but too much in a European way, because I call myself a theoretician. Because in the revolutionary movement, the idea is if you have a revolutionary theory and it works, then that's a basis for creating a revolutionary society. And I'm revolutionary, so I call myself a theoretician. But as I underwent transformation, as my philosophy changed, my thought pattern changed, and I was working for balance, because the cosmos, positive and negative are not separate. They go together. Good and bad are not separate. Good is bad. Bad is good. Order and disorder are not separate. Disorder can lead to order if you make an effort.
No, sure.
Order can lead to disorder if you don't do what's right. And in our tradition, the African American tradition, the blues are the spirituals. The blues are really considered to be more secular or govern the political sphere. And the spirituals are considered to be more spirit and spiritual based. But the truth is, the blues are the spirituals. And so I was using both African thought and African American thought to reorganize my philosophy, thought pattern, communication, and behavior pattern. Those are formulas Malcolm X had, but I'm using it in my way. So it took me a long time. So when I went through this life crisis, I was looking at my grandmother. I was looking at my mother. I was looking at my great-grandmother. And I realized that my problem wasn't that I disrespected women. I idolized them too much. Because if you ever saw my mother, she's one of the most beautiful women going, and a great mother. She had her shortcomings, we all do. But when she left this earth, me and my brother, my sister are both astrologers. And what we could also see from her, she had done her work. Not all of us do all our work when we come on earth. And the greatest thing she grew in was love. She ran a preschool, an academic preschool, for the last 45 years of her life. And she told my sister that when she could no longer do that, it was time for her to go, because she had 3 missions in life: to love, that was my father, to have children, and to teach. And she was an A student in school and an athlete, and never gained a pound in her life until the last few years of her life. And so that was my mother, because she was on her path. So I had to look at that, because I had also idolized her. I put her on a pedestal. And the same thing with my grandmother and my great-grandmother. And I had to really look at, why had I done that? And begin to take the feminine principle down to earth and integrate it inside of myself. And so the experience of the light came after 5 years of 3 months out of the year working on myself, and a 15 or 20 years of African philosophy and engaging it as you are doing in South Africa, where people are practicing what they believe. That is the key. And working on balance. And your idea of the woman represents the lunar principle and the man represents the solar principle. That's very true. And that is the lunar principle, which is, as you correctly point out, is the higher spiritual power. And in ancient Africa, the women held the highest spiritual power, spirit power. But that ultimately is the goddess symbol. And so in the ancient civilizations, the goddess figure was the highest figure in any kind of spiritual system. And so the union of those two, as you said, these two have to cooperate. And so my struggle was to get them to a point where I could have synthesis. Behind me, you can see 2 statues right behind my name there. Those are Numo twin statues coming from the Dogon. I'm wearing this outfit because it's a Dogon outfit. And so the Numo twins are, Numo means words. It's kind of like Netters and Kemet, or Rishas in the Yoruba, divine principles, also ancestral forces. The Numo was sent to Earth, this is according to the Dogon, to assist God. And so they cooperate. So you see a male and a female there, one with breast, one with chest. The female, you can't see it, but she has a beard of a deceased pharaoh. What that means is the masculine within the feminine. And the male has his chest extended breast. It's symbolizing the feminine within the masculine. And you can see they're of the same size, and you could see the arm is around the other. As you said, they're cooperating. And so it was, I started with the Dogon because it was a living system, and then moved into Kemet, Yoruba, Sante, and others. But I wanted to be able to model myself, be able to draw from this, and then use it in my own culture. So that enabled me to get to a point where I had gone through life crisis for 5 years. A lot of things were happening in my life, and I had finally reached a point of synthesis. So in the Dogon system, perfection is not the freedom from fault. Perfection is the synthesis, the blending together of masculine and feminine. The powers that you referred to, the intuitive powers of the female, the creative and strong powers of the male, the nurturing powers of the female, the hard and strong powers of the male. Is bringing both together. And so in African systems, and for people in general, the male needs to work on his weak side, which is usually the soft side, the feminine side, the higher mind side. Because if we don't, then you're going to be like I was. I'm a theoretician. I had a bunch of ideas, and you never hear me talking about the spirit. Now that's all you ever hear me talking about. You understand? Because the intellect's fine. But if all you got, and that's the point you were making about AI, artificial intelligence, they think that if they combine a whole lot of knowledge together, then they can get to an answer quicker than one person can. But as you said, can't intuit, cannot be intuitional, cannot create anything new. You hear me? But I know what that's for, making quick decisions for control, for domination. That's what that's about. But it's putting the servant mind, which is the despiritualized mind, the logical mind without the higher spirit force, in charge. That's putting the servant in charge of the house. You hear me? Huh? The mouse in charge of the elephant. It makes no sense. And we'll beat that every time. Just like the Israelis are seeing right now, that those Palestinians surprised them with that attack. Oh, they're running because the Jews are supposed to be smart. We're all smart. Guess what? You don't know what's in somebody else's mind. And if you're stepping on them all the time, expect them to rear back. And I want to express my sympathy and support for the Palestinians. I don't like to see anybody killed. But this stuff that's going on right now, that's genocide. And it needs to stop. And Biden needs to get up off his high horse and quit trying to be slick, and tell them to, because it's America that is doing as much of this damage as the Israelis are, because it's their guns, it's their rockets, it's their airplanes, it's all of their military might that they're using. So all I'm saying here is that, so twin lineal, this is the salvation for our people, because it is the formula for just societies. And until we can get back to that, we have crooks, whether they're white crooks who are running the White House and running the IMF, World Bank, or it's black crooks who've got guns pointed at their people and ripping them off. Whatever it is, we're under a forced control. But this paradigm is a paradigm for reshaping just societies. So what I like most about you, brother, is your spirit. And I like you practice what you preach. And I like that you're a nice person and you're dedicating yourself to your people. And I can see with you a lot of love. And that is really the key to everything we do, which is love. I know we've only got a few minutes because of the power situation in South Africa. You want to wrap this up?
Yes, yes. I just wanted, the few minutes remaining, just to connect. You spoke about the Anu people. Those are the Anunnaki.
Mm-hmm.
Have you managed to make a link between the Twa and the Anunnaki?
Oh yeah, definitely. They're the people that migrated from South Africa into the Nile Valley, and I've done extensive research on this. And when you look at their artifacts and everything else, the most prominent thing in those artifacts are the big mamas. There's so many of them, it's funny. And then it's clear that when Diop and Obenga made their argument before UNESCO on the blackness of Kemet, their most important proof was the picture that I have on my book, The Integration Trap, Generation Gap Caused by a Choice Between Two Cultures, of an Anu, a little tiny Anu man. And so we know that the first pharaohs were them. And we know that 10,000 BC on up, they innovated almost all the things that make up Kemetic civilization. I've done a number of shows on this. Yeah, definitely. That's
the people. What I was referring to as well, Baba, is the people that came.
Power went out. It went out precisely at 11. So that's going to wrap this up. We knew that we didn't have but an hour, and you got some.
Yes.
You're back on.
No,
right on. Go ahead.
Baba. What I was saying that remember that have you ever heard of a Nibiru?
No.
Planet Nibiru. There's also the Anunnaki that descended from Nibiru. They are people, their leaders were Enki and Enlil. These are, they called the Sumerian text.
Oh, okay.
If you can get that one by Zachariah Sitkin, it gives you all that, how modern humans were actually created, which links back to the Twa people, from those people who assisted us, because the Anunnakis that landed from here, they landed here in South Africa as well, at a place called Inzaloelang, which is why it's important, we spoke about it the other time, it's supposed to be our Mecca. So, these are the beings that, they say they are like us. Anunnaki are exactly like us. So in future, Baba, just try and make a link between the Anunnaki and the Twa people, so that people are able to connect.
Give me the spelling on that.
The Anunnaki, ANUNAKI.
ANUN.
ANUNAKI.
Okay. Yeah, I'll check it out.
Anunnaki.
Right, I'll check it out.
A person that has written a lot about the Anunnaki is Zachariah Sitkin.
Okay.
He's written a lot of information about the Anunnaki.
Okay, I'll
and
check
the place where they landed first, it was here, in southern Kemet, a place we call South Africa. This is exactly where they landed, which is why this place where we are, is very important, for the restoration of the character, of an African person, because it's associated with the beginning. Our ancestors, they called the Zeptepi. The first time it happened here and nowhere else.
Okay.
Yes,
what I'd also say is this, that because this family system, and it's more than a family system, because remember, the formula for just societies is all the males and females being equally empowered to govern every phase of society, every phase. The first phase is family. And so this goes back to the beginning of time, so that at the heart of our strength as a people is this knowledge that we need balance between males and females, which is what you're talking about. And in the villages of Africa, that's where you see the greatest cooperation going on in Africa, and where the biggest answers for the future of African people is. And it's the same thing for Africans in the diaspora in the United States or in the Caribbean or in Brazil or wherever. It's the poorest people who are at the bottom, who carry the strongest reservoir of the culture. And it's those who give us the bouts and battles for freedom, because they're on the bottom, but because they are also closest to the source. So it's that we have to revitalize as we revitalize other parts of our civilization to regain power. Could I just ask you a question? In South Africa right now, I understand that you have some movements going on in South Africa right now. I understand that you have is it a Freedom Party? Brother who shut down, or at least led a movement to kind of have a one-day shutdown of power in South Africa. Yeah. What about that?
Yes. No, it's called the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters.
Okay.
Now, what our standpoint is that no politics will deliver anything for an African person. We need to destroy this politics, because the politics, was brought in here by a colonizer. It's a white man construct to revert back, to our tried and tested governing system, that we are familiar with, we resonate with. Before the colonizers came here, Africa will never be free until and unless we get rid of republics on the continent, because that is the worst chain that is holding back Africa. We need to reconstruct our own governing system. So we are not involved in politics, and we don't believe there's any political party or any political formation that can liberate a African person, because they are all operating within the confines of a Western construct.
Yeah, you're right. And for example, that paradigm comes from Britain, it comes from France, and then the United States has aped it and pushed it around the world. And so your example, you gave one of the political parties. African independence was carried out through political parties. And most African leaders didn't think about, well, how did those really work in these countries that it came from? And so in Britain, for example, when the king was reduced to a powerless position, and you have Magna Carta, and it's supposed to give people certain rights, what happens is Parliament takes the place, the government, and the party takes the place of the king. And what do? They do the same thing the king did. They behave like gangsters. Yeah, you're exactly right. And in the United States, or some people call it the United Snakes. On the one hand, you could say one party, two names, the political philosophy in both are right wing. So you have the Democratic and Republican Party. But when you look at them, there's very little that separates the two.
Yes.
And both of them are to the right. And the government has been set up for that purpose, so that parties in this country make decisions, and they are dancing to the tune of the corporations that run things. And so, like right now, there's a great movement in the country against what's going on in Palestine. But neither party reflects that. And there's some people that don't like what's going on in Ukraine. But the two parties up to now, the Republicans are now, because of Trump, questioning whether they should be involved in financing Ukraine. But the people don't have any say-so about this. So for them to call this a democracy, it's a republic. And so, your point about the governments of Africa when they were small, and the most just societies were the small ones, they had no state. In the West, the state means the government with the army, with the intelligence, with the police,
Yes.
with the force and violence, because in the West, a very few people have everything, and the rest of the people are on the bottom. And so when they build up a police structure, it's not to protect you from an invader, it's to protect the people who have been robbing you from their own people. So this
No, that's
idea of government, again, all the males and females being equally empowered to govern every phase of society, it is a formula for how we need to reconstruct government. So you're right that the way this thing is constructed now, and in South Africa, you have the same thing that you have here, the crooks who are getting everything and then, refusing sometimes to go to court, not ever thinking about giving up what they have while the people are living in misery and calling this freedom. So, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Because when Mandela was in, they told him, go slow. Don't do too much. And the main thing is let the white people keep the wealth.
That's the thing.
A lot of the
That's
land,
That's the thing, because we see all politicians as managers of a white system which continues to subjugate the majority or the owners, the true owners of the land. Because as long as the republics still remain, we are still subjects of the British Empire, because these are the people who came with these republics. So Africa can never liberate itself without destroying these republics. So that is our view when it comes to politics. We are trying to unite people outside of politics and religion, so that we go back pre-colonial, area. What were we doing before colonizers came here? This is what we are trying to get in touch with, and our strength and power, it's in that spirituality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, applying the past to the present to change it so we have a better present and future. So, yeah, and we have to think beyond the European nation state model and come up with one where people are doing the running of things, which we did until the coming of the European. Because even when we had kings and queens in much of Africa, until the breakdown occurs and presence of Arabs and Christians and then colonizers and enslavers, up until that point, even when you had kings and queens, the people at the village level ran their societies. The kings,
that's true.
They didn't run. And until the coming of the European, we didn't have standing armies because we didn't need any, but we had militias. Like here, we call them National Guard, where people had their weapons stored at home. So if something happens, somebody invade the country, then they can stand up and fight. But there was no standing army. You understand? The United States is a rundown country. The
whole community was an army.
Say that again.
The whole community was an army.
Right, when you needed them.
It was their place. Yes.
Yeah.
They had to defend it.
Right. But you didn't have to pay for it because it was at home and it was there to be used to defend your family, your villages, and your nation. But here, 90% or more of the federal budget is going into arms, and that goes into arms manufacturers. And then you see all these mass killings in this country and everything else. Mass killings that this country runs around the world. And so streets are run down, schools, particularly if you're black or brown, there's not enough money in them because it depends on property taxes. We don't own much property, so we don't have enough taxes to put in. And then when we do, here comes the people who want to have privatization of education like they do everything else, where they want you to sell your water to a foreign company, And so what we have now is in the city I'm living in, 40% of the schools are charter schools owned by the private people. But what money are they using? they're using my money because I have to pay property taxes
Yes.
and
Yes.
everybody else's money. And I wouldn't mind if it was being, paid for to benefit my children, but it's going into the pockets of the rich. And we got Negroes who are being trained. Those are black people on their knees trying to grow. They are being trained to be superintendents to come in and direct that money into private pockets. And then they shut down schools and everything else. So this whole project, another part of this project that we didn't have, that is what really sustains this nation state that does people in, is private property, the ownership of land, air, and water. That was shared collectively by everybody.
No,
so
sure.
when they come in with
That
an
is true.
IMF loan, it's all about taking your property, which
That's true.
should be shared by everybody, your gold,
No, that's
your
true.
uranium, your water, everything else you have, and put it into private hands.
No,
Take
sure.
your power and put it into private hands. They say we know better.
No, sure.
Yeah, they do. They know how to charge you more. They know how to enrich themselves more. They know how to mess things up. And it's because they got you to sign a contract for some aid that you got to pay back in interest and will never be able to pay. And they can keep robbing you. So you're right. We're in a crooked system. We got to get out of it.
We have to get out the first leg that needs our attention, Baba, which is why, we're somehow messed up when we couldn't talk, because we are in the process of, organizing for the reintroduction of our education system as African people. We urgently need to get in touch with also, Dr. Theophile Obenga, because we need to prepare. This knowledge is the knowledge of the future. So therefore, we need to prepare now, because the system, when it falls, or when we restructure our governing system, we need to be ready. We shouldn't be starting then, starting to organize curriculum and all those things. Those are things that should be done now, because we have the whole content. There's so much content on the continent. We don't need foreign content.
Right.
So this is the time, Baba, to truly prepare for the future as if the future is yesterday, so that we are not caught up, and not ready. Because when let's say when people leave the continent, what are we going to read? In the first place, we are fed by the colonizer. That's a fact. The colonizer is educating our people. Is it right? It's not right.
Right.
So, which is why, all of us that are trying to work towards, who have this love, for the African nation, we need to prepare for future governance now, because system is crumbling. So we shouldn't be caught up as if we didn't know that this system, it has to fall, because it doesn't have resonance with the people of the continent, with the continent itself. It's associated with subjugation. Now, as we are rising, we need to prepare, so that, especially the education, the poison that our children are consuming all over the world. And now it's an opportunity for all intellectuals of the continent, people who are in the forefront of pushing this content to prepare. Let us prepare for the future, because the future is nearer than what we think. So we shouldn't be caught not being ready.
Yeah, you and I, we're going to have another personal conversation, and I'll give you the contact for Obenga, and also I'll call him and let him know who you are, so you can get in contact, and you can get in contact through WhatsApp. So It doesn't cost
Yes.
anything. The other,
Yes.
so I'm going to quote Obenga on this and then deal with this. Obenga says this: we have a problem. We have African-centered content. Now, most of us don't. You're talking also about how in Africa, we're still getting European content. In America, too, though we've had some movements to get this into the curriculum, it's not widespread. So on the one hand, we need African-centered content.
Yes.
But in some places, we have that. We certainly have scholars who are putting that out, past and present. What we really need now is the African-centered method. And that means the teaching method. And it's not just for the classroom, it's for the whole society, because Africans never restricted teaching to the classroom. That's my next book. And I'm nearly finished with it. I've done 676 pages. Had I not been doing this show, I'd probably have more. But it's a 25-year project. It'll be finished early next year. The book is called, right now, it's called Seba, to know the truth is to be the truth. Now, here's the problem we have with method. The European method is to deposit facts in your head. When we're African-centered, what we do is we take the African-centered information and we use the Eurocentric method. We also place facts in people's heads. The difference is the facts are African, but the method is European. And so this system, it's two levels of the system that I've laid out, because I'm a revolutionary. I've developed 6 systems of thought that you can use right now. Twin lineal is one of them. In fact, it's 2. So this one is drawing on the old understanding that the human being is a light, is a star, all of us. In fact, astrophysics teaches that we are all stellar dust. We're made of the same composition as the stars. The Kemites understood this. So when you understand that, then you understand that a student is not like a bank account where you put money in or pull it out. It's not some material thing. A student is a light, a star. And so what do you have to do? You have to bring the light that is within out. And so it's bringing the gifts of the students out so that they can be their own self. You are doing what you were put here to do. I know it. I know I'm doing what I'm put here to do. Western education trains you and me or anybody else to be a servant of their system, to go for the money, to get a job, and that's it. But we need to be about servicing humanity based on our special gifts, whatever they are. And we should be able to earn a living that way. So that's basically what this is. The second part of this system is for those whose lights are shining. Some may want to be masters of the light. And so this second one is about how we can move from just being average to being the best at any field that we're in. And that's the mastering, the master system that Africa had all over Africa. I'm using the Dogon and African American system, but they're all the same all over Africa, where you apprentice under masters. And so that's the 2 parts of this. And this stuff works. That's why I've taken a long time working on it, and I can be used today. It's not, but the biggest classroom is not the little classroom you go to. It's your community. It's your village.
The experience.
It's your nation, because that's the world that gives you the opportunity to shine, because the sun doesn't just shine in a classroom. It shines over all the earth, and the moon does the same thing, and going through its different phases in cooperation with the sun. We're going back to the masculine, feminine principle. I know that my awakening didn't come in a classroom. I didn't learn much of anything in the classroom. My awakening came in the battlefield of the Black community. And that's what taught me who I am, taught me what I didn't know, and then told me what I needed to go back to know. So that's what this system is, and it'll be out shortly. And I'll see that you get a copy, but I'll send you the draft so you can give me your comments on it. You know what I mean? Before it comes out. You know.
Really appreciate. Yes, no, Baba. I think we can end. My power bank is about to go as well.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. And I just want to say, brother Mkhulu, it's a real pleasure. I'm so lucky to have hooked up with you. You hear me? You're the brother from another mother. You hear me? And we'll be working together and doing a lot of work. I'd like to come to South Africa, and I'd like to bring you here so you can share wisdom with our people. You know what I mean?
Please. No, thank you so much. I'm also honored because I know you for a long time. I know your history. You know, your input here, you know, your activities in the struggle, you know, in the past. So I've always respected you, Baba. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you. This has been pure pleasure. And I know that you're going to be going, but as long as your power is on, we'll go to questions and see if we have any comments here